Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Content Warfare Podcast. Well, this is actually the TV episode. The last two episodes I did were the podcast only, but this episode is actually live and TV, and I have the wonderful Gini Dietrich with me. And now I'm going to try to reel back from that awful intro. Ginny, how are you?
That was kind of awesome, actually. Sort of fits,
It's funny, so the last two episodes I've done have been audio only of the show. Just my life I didn't have a show scheduled, and so you get like in that mode, like you just say that intro over and over and over again, and then you don't. It's hard to pull your brain out of it. But for those who don't know, Ginny, she is the founder of Dietrich, and the Marketing in the Round, co-author and author of Spin Sucks. We're going to talk a lot about that today. And I also want to say, and I don't know if this word is PC or not, but a pretty cool chick, right? Pretty cool. Like I've had the opportunity to meet her in person. A lot of fun. Social media marketing world. You and Marcus did a great job together. That was the presentation I saw, and it was just fun to meet you. And we got a great selfie. The three of us got a great selfie together. So. But what else is going on? What else do you have going on now that,
oh, jeez.
like in a 10,000 foot, you don't have to tell us day to day, but,
well, today I had a staff meeting.
But, so let's not go there. Let's make this a little more structured so that it actually has some value for people. I want to start right with my question I'm the most interested in right now, and that is, I know the marketing world is changing very rapidly, right? Like digital marketing, online marketing, do. I don't know the public relations, PR, dealing with the media world very much, but I can only assume that it's changing very rapidly. What are some of the major changes that you've seen from even the last year or the last 2 or 3 years that if someone was stepping in today would seem like this is the way it is, but maybe for you, someone who's been in this business for a long time, are major changes, like major things that are happening in the industry right now?
You calling me old, Ryan?
No, I said a couple years. You've been in the business for a couple years. That could be 2 or 3. I chose those words very carefully.
It's like I was just included on the top 42 PR pros older than 42, and I'm like, I'm not even 40 yet.
Oh my God! Are you serious? Wow.
But that's okay, because I was included on a top 50 list like a month ago. I was like, 50? I mean, come on, I don't even have wrinkles yet.
Oh my gosh. You know what you need to do? See, so this is something about avatars, right? Like you should have pertinent data in our avatars.
Like baseball cards, you just flip it over. And
right, you flip it over, and there's like your stats. Because I meet people in person, and they're like, you're so much taller than they're like looking up at me, because I'm like almost 6.
You are very tall.
And that like freaks people out. And it's like, I don't want to freak people out when I meet them because I think I'm a giant or something, so like there's stats on the back of our avatar.
I agree. I like that idea a lot. There's a business idea for you. Major changes in the PR industry. Actually, it's changed quite a bit. And really where we saw it happen was in 2008 when remember when all the newspapers and magazines went out of business. It was like you couldn't open your internet browser without finding another publication that had gone out of business. Yesterday, I wrote a blog post about this. There was an article in Inc. that talked about the things that startups should and shouldn't do. And one of the things was you should not hire a PR firm or a PR professional, but you should do social media and blogging. And I was like, that is PR. So I don't know why you're saying that. So it's interesting in that people have the perception that PR is just media relations. It certainly is one piece of what the industry does, but it has evolved so much that it does include social, it does include content, it does include paid media from the perspective of lead generation and email marketing and Twitter cards and Facebook and LinkedIn advertising, that kind of stuff. I mean, we're not out there writing commercials or jingles or anything like that, but we are doing some paid media when it affects content and social.
Yeah. See, this is really interesting to me because it seems like if you take maybe like the branding design industry, the SEO industry, the traditional PR industry and you take, say, social media, content marketing / copywriting, these 4 quadrants have really become one thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's very hard to delineate between the two, because one of the things I was going through some notes and stuff and reading some of your articles, and one thing I find very interesting is the idea of dealing with negative, right? The negative feedback that you get from the things you do, because this is something that even very small business, small business especially, are not prepared for, but even large businesses are not necessarily prepared for blowback on different things. So when I think of PR, one of the cornerstone pillars that makes it so important to at least have somebody that you can work with if they're not on retainer is this idea of negative. So what are some of the things that, in that area, like you would come in and help them with, or that people should be considering, and this can even drill down to negative things on, say, a blog. If you post a blog post and you get negative comments from a troll like that. So,
it's really interesting because you're right. In the olden days, because I have been in the business more than 2 or 3 years, you had people who specialized in crisis communication, and we would create plans and we would do some, we would build scenarios and we would work through everything, and then it would sort of just sit in a drawer and wait. And usually, you'd have 1 or 2 big crises a year, and that's because you specialized in it. So most organizations didn't. Well, today, everybody can have a potential crisis because of, customers have a megaphone and they go out there. Union Street Guest House is probably the most recent one, where they were caught saying that they were going to charge people $500 for every negative review that was posted. And the way that they handled that was horrendous. And it's because he's a small business owner. He even said he's a music and hospitality expert. He's not a digital expert. He's not a social expert. He's not a communicator. He clearly had nobody to talk to about it because he kept fumbling over himself. And so I always joke that you should have a communicator as one of your BFFs that you could have on speed dial and be like, holy crap, what do I do now? But really, the hardest part about being under attack is we take these things personally. And so when we take things personally, and there's no reason you wouldn't, because it's your business, you've built this thing, you've put your blood, sweat, and tears and all of your hours into it, so of course you're going to take negative responses personally. You have to take a step back and say, okay, this isn't personal. How do I approach it rationally and logically? And how do I really listen to what the person is saying, apologize, and fix it? And I think that's the hardest part that people have, is we can't take a step back and say, and that's almost why you need somebody from the outside to come in and have a completely different view on it, who's not emotionally attached to the business, and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say we're sorry, we're going to fix it, and we're going to be done.
So what I hear you saying is maybe structured transparency in these things is part of the answer.
That's a great way of putting it, yeah.
Because obviously you don't want to be too transparent, because then you may get yourself in even more trouble. Like, oh yeah, John sexually harasses people all the time. This time he's on social media. You know what I mean? Like that might be bad. But some sort of we know there's an issue. We're dealing with it. Here's how we're dealing with it. So okay, so. Being that a lot of the people who listen and watch this show are mostly smaller businesses, mid to small size businesses, let's say that they are, so let's take this out of, and only because I know that you have some thoughts on this, and they post something into their website and they start to get that negative feedback. What are just maybe 1 or 2 things that they could do, and then before, say, they reach out to somebody, and at what point do you think they need to then, now I need help, like I need someone who understands how to manage this, like you said, a communicator or somebody at a firm who can then come in and start to quell this thing? Like, where is that tipping point?
So if you're in the middle of it, it's too late. You need somebody beforehand, and that's why you always want to be prepared. And even if you don't have a communicator as your BFF who has been through this, you can very well sit down, and you should. Every small business owner should do this. Sit down and say, what are the potential scenarios that could happen? Somebody could post a negative review, somebody could post a negative comment, somebody could bring their tribe to my blog and start attacking us. So you go through these potential scenarios, and then you write down what you would say and how you would handle it. So that then when something like that happens, and it will happen, when something like that happens, you can pull out your piece of paper and go, okay, when I was of rational mind and I wasn't taking this personally, this is how I said I was going to respond. Now, you are going to have instances where there are trolls, and I remember one time, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, that somebody very popular engaged his tribe to come and attack me. And I was just like, look, this is how I feel about it, and you're on my blog, and if you don't agree, then that's fine, but you're in my house. So you have to sort of ignore the trolls as well, and you have to know where that line is. Are they just being trolls, or do they have something valid that you can take and say, okay, we need to change our operations or our product or our service to accommodate these concerns?
Yeah. You know, that takes me someplace that I was going to wait to go to, but I think since you brought it up is an interesting point, and that's the idea of where conversations are happening. So you were talking about someone engaging their tribe and bringing them to your site, which is a ludicrous thought in my mind for anyone to do. But, you know, we talked a little bit about this. This was kind of, or at least it was brought up at Social Media Marketing World, what you and Marcus were talking about, because Copyblogger had just taken their comments down. And I don't necessarily want to get into should you have comments or should you not, but I'm more.
You already know where I live on that.
Yeah. You know, what I'm more interested in is you know, where conversations are happening today, right? Like, you know, you think back before the internet, conversations happened in these public places and diners and bars and you know, you were with this group of people, and that's where conversations happening. And now conversations are happening in these digital spaces, in the comment sections or in social media. You know, how do you get a handle on all the places that conversations are happening about your brand? Like, what should people be thinking about? Should they be trying to control where conversations are happening, which is kind of what I feel like Copyblogger is doing? Or should they, you know, and other people have done this since them, you know, they kind of were the domino. Or do you let them happen organically and try to just be part of them and not fight where the conversations happen?
In the book, I wrote the phrase, "Control is out, empowers the new black." Kind of going off Orange is the New Black. And the reason being is that we don't have control. And we can try to control it. We can say, okay, we're going to shut down our blog comments and we only want you to have conversations on Google+. Well, that's not how people work. People are going to have conversations where it's convenient for them, not where it's convenient for you. So, yeah, you absolutely should let it happen organically, and you monitor and you listen and you pay attention and you join the conversation when it's appropriate where those conversations are happening.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing. You know, I put a lot of thought into the comments, and I had Marcus on here a few weeks ago, maybe even a month ago now, and we were talking about the comments thing and about how I've personally thought about taking them off multiple times because I just, you know, as a one-man show as I am right now, it's very hard for me to have, you know, people replying to me on Twitter, people commenting on Google+, and you know, and then it's like none of the conversations connect. And I just did a site redesign well, it's been in process for a long time, but it launched last week, and I added them, and I just said I'm done with it. And the reason being was what you just said, is that as much as I would love for there to be one thing that allowed me to comment in all the places, and I'm sure there's some tool that does that, but you just can't stop it from happening, right? It's impossible. So, you know, so are there any, you know, and I don't want to get tactical, but like, are there any tools or best practices for managing these things that you know of or that you recommend to people for managing these conversations and making sure that you're getting back to people?
I'm sure that our shared media manager could actually answer this better than I can. I'll tell you how I do it. I have Talkwalker alerts set up. I pay attention to the pingbacks on our blog. Yep. And I answer every single person who comments to us on the blog.
Wow.
I try really hard on Facebook and Twitter. Some days I'm better than others. Google Plus isn't out of control, or LinkedIn's not out of control, so that's fairly easy. You know, I maybe get 20 or 30 alerts on Google Plus a day, which The others is nothing. So that's how I manage it. You know, there's probably some stuff I missed. People will tweet me articles, you know, that I've missed and kind of get snotty, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'll get there, you know. So, and it's hard. I probably spent an hour and a half yesterday going through and commenting on blogs where we've been mentioned and stuff like that. It's not easy. But I'm sure there's probably even easier ways to do it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I asked you that question, and you know, I go organic with just about everything. Like, I don't use a tool to manage my social media, which I'm sure is like an awful best practice thing. If I
think it's because we started with nothing.
Yeah.
In the beginning, there was nothing, and so we sort of got used to doing it. I think that's probably why.
And you know, like, I've tried the Hootsuite and these different things, and you do the free trial of this to see if you like it, and I just always come back to I feel like I can't give my audience the authentic kind of me, if that actually, you know, if that makes sense, in these systems, right? It just always feels a little contrived when I'm using things. Now, I know, like, there are guys on like Mike Altman for the Google Plus community. He's very big in the Google Plus community. Is huge on Hootsuite and Pro, and he can make it work, and that's fantastic. But for me, I've just never been able to. That additional layer for me has always made it feel inorganic, which then, you know, going back to your conversation thing, I feel like, why am I communicating with someone if it's inorganic? Like, now it doesn't mean anything. Not inorganic. If it's inorganic.
It's almost like it's almost like the conversation's happening over here and you're over here, and then you have this middle thing that you're talking through.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. I totally agree with you. That's interesting. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So, you know, I just find it very interesting. I like to know how people manage these things, because I try to do the same thing. I have a really hard time with the pingbacks, because sometimes, like, someone mentions you in an article, and it's just like, oh my God, I don't have time to read that article. It's not that I don't care or don't appreciate it. I do. Like, I love it. I appreciate everyone. But at the same time, like, I now have to, like, find where you're mentioned in the article, so I got to do, like, a Control F and then like, you know, read the section. It's like, I just don't have time for another article today, and I'm not trying. That sounds like a little like, oh, you know, woe is you kind of thing. But
no, I get it.
There's just limited time in the day, and you just try your best. But
well, and I think too that, you know, people say to me all the time, well, how did you do this in the beginning? And the truth of the matter is that it all came about when the economy sucked, and I just didn't have enough work to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if all this stuff launched today, I wouldn't be able to spend the kind of time I did back then. So.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I mean, one thing I've seen. So I've only really been doing online work for 5 years, I guess, total. But even the first 2 were very, very limited. It's really been 3 years of being part of it. And even in that time, it was blog comments, right? And we maybe have talked about this before, but, like, I built my initial relationships commenting on people's blogs.
Yep.
I found blogs.
Yep.
Yours was one of them. Marx's was one of them. Mark Schaefer's was another one.
Yep.
And I liked the people. I liked what I got from the blog. I commented. You know, you would respond. We'd start to, oh, okay, we have these similarities, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You came on my show, episode 38. We talked about great customer relationships and stuff. And, like, that all formed, and now it's like, man, well, this person only is on Twitter, and they don't reply to blog comments, and they're no place else. So if I want to engage with them, I have to go to Twitter.
Right.
Like, I like Twitter, but it's not my favorite. You know, so it's like, it seems so disconnected right now.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it comes back. I'm hoping that's part of just the immaturity of.
It might be, yeah.
You know, I'm hoping it comes back. I feel like it will, but it doesn't seem like we're in a consolidation state at all. So. It just feels like the conversations are getting more and more fragmented to me. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree with you, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And part of that is organizations forcing people to go where it's convenient for them. And so then the conversation stops because there's no way. I mean, a friend of mine and I had this conversation about Copyblogger because he wanted to comment on something that they had posted. And he went over to Google Plus because that's where they said, you know, and he went to do that, but there was no there was conversation happening, but they weren't involved in the conversation. And he's like, I really want to have a conversation with them about this because I disagree, and, you know, and he was finally like, I give up. So I think the message to businesses is you have to go where customers go. So it's just like you want to have the phone number and the email address and the social networks on your Contact Us page, because you want to make it convenient for the customer, not convenient for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know I used to follow Derek Halpern pretty closely. Not because I wanted to sell information products, but I just was interested in his method, right? Mm-hmm. He has a different method than a lot of people, and I was just interested in dissecting it and figuring out what it was all about. And his whole thing is this idea of he doesn't engage in social media really. He does occasionally, but for the most part, it's get people on his email list, and I know that there's a whole thing to that, and it's not the structure that most businesses would want to have. But the concept is, I want to communicate via email, so I'm going to make everyone who wants to be part of my thing go through email. And, for what he produces, email is very tough for me, so I don't subscribe to his blog or whatever, and that's the way it is. So in thinking a lot about that, I wonder, because he has said, I only want email. I don't care if you connect with me on Google Plus or Twitter. It's great if you do, but I only care about your email. How much is left on the table because of that, right? Like, how much brand and how much messaging and connection and relationships are left on the table because you're forcing people to use email? Like, what if you're a huge Feedly user, right? Like, and you just love RSS, I mean, it's so, I guess we're kind of beating up this point, but it just seems to me like it takes me to where my next question is going. So let me just go there. And it's the idea of digital sharecropping, right? Another copy blogger thing. They didn't create it; they kind of popularized it. Of the idea of creating on other platforms you don't own, without the intention of drawing people back to your blog. I just like your initial thoughts on it, and then I have some kind of we'll go from there.
Trying to think of how to say this nicely. I think it's stupid.
Okay.
And that's one of the things we advise clients too. And I remember about 2 years ago, I was speaking to a group of business owners, and there were about 20 of them. And we got in this big debate because one of the business owners said, I can't afford to have somebody build my website, which in today's day and age, I think is baloney, because with WordPress and some things, you really don't have to hire anybody to do it. I mean,
what they're saying is, I'm not taking my business seriously. That's when I hear that.
Right.
What goes in my brain is, I'm not willing to take my business seriously. There's no one who's serious about business that can't afford at least a basic, well-designed WordPress site.
Correct. It's $100, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, why can't I just build my business on Facebook and drive everybody there? And I was like, oh my gosh, because Facebook eventually is going to die. I mean, look where Facebook is right now, and people are all upset about the Messenger app, and people are deleting it, and they're not getting direct messages or private messages anymore, and it's become this huge ordeal. Eventually, Facebook will go the way of AOL and Netscape and Alta Vista and all of the others that have died, MySpace, that have died. It may not happen in the next 5 years, but why would you want to build your community and your business on something you don't own? You don't have any information, you have no data, you have no metrics, you don't know what people are doing, you don't know who's visiting, you don't know what kinds of content they're paying attention to, even if they're not, especially if they're not commenting on it. From a business perspective, it makes no sense to me that you would rent that out to a social network and it will go away with the social network when the social network goes, and the social networks will go.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. The Facebook thing is really interesting to me, right? Because there are, especially in the industry that is kind of my primary vertical, the insurance industry, there's a lot of agencies that said, I'm not going to build a website, I'm going to put up a Facebook page, and that's going to be my home base. And now you get all this, oh my God, the internet doesn't work, digital marketing doesn't work, you can't connect with consumers online because their Facebook page isn't connecting to people, right? So,
well, yeah, because Facebook said unless you're paying for it, you're not getting access to your likes anymore, to your fans anymore.
Which here's the thing, like, if you're willing to pay for it, which I guess if you're willing to build there, you should, it is still an incredible platform for driving things. Like, if you're willing to pay for it, it's a great advertising. It's a better than great advertising platform. Right. But it's not free anymore to do those things. So here is my thought that I've recently been formulating, and I want to run it by you. So I completely agree with everything you said. Can't be your home base. But what are your thoughts on if you have a home base? So I'm going to use myself as an example for this, for the context of this question. I have close to 400 posts on my blog. I get pretty regular, steady traffic of decent volume, increasing on a regular basis. I know that if I create a YouTube video and I embed it on my site, and then I drive people to my site, it gets exponentially less views than if I drive people to the YouTube page. Just the nature of way people view videos. I've done this over and over and over again. I've tried this thing, and it comes back the same way every time. Embedded videos on my site get significantly less views than if I do the same marketing, but I drive everyone to YouTube. And this is where the question comes in. For someone like myself who has an established home base, who has a place to send people, who has email capture form, all the things, I have the content, I have this home base, does it make sense for me to start building content on a platform like YouTube and I just drive people there? So like I create a video, I don't embed it, I have my channel, I'm building up this community there because I have this other thing. Do you think, and I know this is kind of an off-the-cuff question, but does that strategy have any kind of legs to you, or just poke holes in it?
So I would still embed it on your website because you get the SEO value of it. Google loves its own products, so I definitely would still embed it. But I don't see a problem. If you've done the test and you get more traffic and views and all of that on YouTube, then why not? I mean, it's still building your brand. I wouldn't do it as a standalone, but yeah, I don't see a problem with that. In fact, I'm trying to think. I think we drive everybody to our YouTube channel. I don't think we drive it through the website. I should test that. Yeah. I'm curious now.
Yeah, this is like a new thing. I actually I released that audio only episode like 2 days ago for the show, and it was all around like this idea that I just been driving me nuts about YouTube, is that because this digital sharecropping thing, right? Like I get it. It makes sense to me. You don't want to have your home base other places, and and I've been preaching that for years now. But I look at things like if I embed a post onto and so here's the other platform that I'm considering this on. I wouldn't consider this on every platform. Facebook, never. Right. But is LinkedIn. So if I create a LinkedIn post inside of LinkedIn and I share that out through my network, I get exponentially more views on that content than a blog post, and I do the same type of sharing, right? Because LinkedIn wants their post to see more people. It's just for whatever reason, people don't have to leave the platform. It's very easy to consume. And this is another thing I'm thinking is people are consuming it on their mobile phone, right? So I don't want to leave LinkedIn to go to your blog. Right. That's crazy. Right. So in these spaces, I don't know. I'm kind of just like brainstorming with you because you can't get away from me for the next 20 minutes. But
I think LinkedIn is a good place to test that kind of stuff, and we're doing that too and seeing the same kinds of things. It does bother me not to drive people to spin sucks from LinkedIn. Yeah. Bothers me a lot. But you're right. I haven't found the right solution because we too have seen. Like if I do an excerpt and then do read more and have people click over, it's significantly less than people viewing and commenting inside LinkedIn if we just publish there.
Yeah, that LinkedIn is scary to me because they are collecting so much content, and it is so obvious the bias, right? So I've been testing out through a couple articles and I maybe not even the bias, just it makes sense to me that if I'm a LinkedIn user and I have my mobile phone up and I'm flipping through it and I see an article and I click it and it takes me inside of LinkedIn, one very quick movement, or my Safari thing pops up on my phone and the little thing is spinning like this and then the site comes up, like it makes sense to me that people would want to stay in the platform, but sure. God, do I want to give them original thoughts?
I know.
Right?
I totally agree with that. I really struggle with that too.
Yeah, it's very interesting, you know, this idea of where should your original content be, and I think the conclusion I'm starting to come to, and I promise I'm going to get back to actually interviewing you in a minute.
No, I think this is great. Well, I hope
Is
great, but
you know, the thing I keep coming back to is once you've established yourself, like Spin Sucks has an established blog. People come there, they know it, it's there. Once you have that, you know, this is something that I've kind of picked up from Gary V, is this idea of once you have that place, right? Like he has GaryVaynerchuk.com, and he'll tell people, I don't send people there because I don't need to send people there. I catch people on YouTube. I catch them, you know, he does all these Snapchats and things, and he does all that kind of stuff. And then when they want to know about me, they're going to come to my blog and read some of my articles and watch some of the videos and stuff. Like now that he has this thing and he's established, he doesn't need to keep creating on his own place because people are going to watch a YouTube video and then go. And I don't 100% agree with that or 100% see the strategy in my head, but I get the idea is if you have an embedded YouTube video and a YouTube video, you know, and then the video on YouTube, there's almost like this like conflict of interest on where you send people. You know, like where do I send people? Do I send them to the blog page with the embedded video that I know they're not going to watch?
I think it's really smart that you tested that, though. And I would recommend that for everybody. You know, because some people some industries, some organizations may find that they get more views on their own site. So the fact that you've tested it and know that you get significantly more views on your YouTube channel says you should promote it from there. And I'm going to do a test for ours and see.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know. But I think it's really that's the message that I think small business owners have to come away from this with is test, 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 test.
Yeah. We have a quick question from Denver here. I'm just going to pull up. He said, can you clarify if you're using LinkedIn news updates or creating a blog post on LinkedIn if you have that feature? Denver, what I'm talking about is if I create a blog post and I share it into LinkedIn using the kind of traditional methods of embedding, or even if I put an image in and I share it in the relevant groups and do all the things that you would do, versus creating an actual post using the LinkedIn publisher platform in LinkedIn, that post that's in LinkedIn within LinkedIn gets significantly more views than trying to pull people off LinkedIn to my blog. That was what I was referencing there.
Well, and I'll give you a good example. On Friday, Joe Polizzi wrote 3 solutions to John Oliver's rants on native advertising. John Oliver did this like 11-minute rant on how much native advertising sucks. Blah, blah, blah. And so, but Joe wrote it inside LinkedIn, which I think is interesting. He didn't use the Content Marketing Institute site to do it, and it's a really good piece. I mean, he admitted it took him 3 hours to write it, and you can tell it's very, very well done. But it's one of those things where, and to Denver's question, it was on the publishing platform that he used it. Yeah. But it goes back to wow, this is really good, and the SEO value that you're losing because you just posted it in LinkedIn. I mean, I guess you could republish it on your blog and say this was first published in LinkedIn. I guess you could do that.
Yeah. I know some people who publish stuff originally on their site, and then they actually have a content calendar where 2 weeks later they then republish it on LinkedIn saying it was originally published on their blog, and then that way they're getting...
That's not a bad idea. That's a good way to do it too. Yeah.
But let's talk about the John Oliver thing for a second. I'm really interested in your take on that because I watched that video. I actually, in the comment section, wrote like a 700-word response to it, which people don't watch. That gets published at Google Plus, and I don't know who's tested this, but videos in Google Plus where the embedded video is there, super cool feature. No one watches them. But what is your response to that? Like, what were your thoughts on that? Because it's a really interesting piece, and I'm going to hold my tongue because I want to hear what you have to say.
It's a really interesting piece. It was hilarious. And being in the industry, yeah, I mean, there are some points about it that he's right. But one of the things he talks about is the blurring of church and state and how we can't have unbiased media without the separation of church and state. But what the funny thing to me about it is that we've never really had separation of church and state. I mean, my entire career, there have always been advertorials and things like that where you can pay to have editorial in publications. So I think the big difference is that it hasn't hit the big guys yet. So now the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, the Atlantic, the New York Times, they're all testing this native advertising or sponsored content. And I think that's why people are kind of going, what? Wait a second. Even though it's always happened in trade publications, and throughout my career has always happened in the consumer publications, you know, Better Homes and Gardens, Cosmo, those kinds of pubs. It's always happened for my entire career. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that people are kind of freaking out about it right now, but media have to figure out a way to make money. And one of the things that Joe says in here is that we have to fix the media business model. There are 9 ways to do that: advertising, subscriptions, premium content, events, cross-media promotion, crowdfunding, micropayments, philanthropy or donations, and product sales. And part of advertising is getting brands to pay for content, which they've always done in the form of banner ads and side ads, and you know, we've always had the ads. It's just in a different form now. So that's my take on it from an industry perspective.
So from someone outside, what I said was he's making the assumption that articles in the newspaper have ever been purely unbiased, right? Like that was the thing that bugged me about it. It was like,
it's not true.
Yeah, news is so pure and so unbiased, and all of a sudden, because GE wants to sponsor a survey about car usage, you know, in tires or something, you know, and then you use the article about Orange is the New Black, right? So that article is actually very valuable. It brings up important issues about women in jail and cites some relevant statistics. And there is nothing about that isn't adding value to the conversation.
Right.
Who the heck? This is the thing. Like, the purists, the journalistic purists who still haven't barely understand that the internet in general somehow believe that the audience cares at all that Orange is the New Black sponsored that article. They... You know, as a reader of the newspaper, I could care less. Like, is the article, first of all, unless the information is false, like I would care about that.
Right.
And I would care if somehow the spin, I didn't understand where the author was coming, where the creator of the content was coming from. Otherwise, right, I read left-wing spin, I read right-wing spin articles, I read libertarians. I mean, I read whatever is interesting to you, and you know where the people are coming from, so you know how to categorize in your mind.
Right.
Who cares that they sponsored that content, especially when a lot of times what you're getting is really good research-driven stuff, survey-driven stuff the newspaper could have never afforded to do in the first place.
Right.
And now that information's got, so I thought it was complete ridiculous BS and just like.
It was funny though.
Yeah, but it was hilarious. I mean, he is hilarious. He is hilarious. I think he's hilarious, and for entertainment value, I enjoyed the piece immensely. I just like jumped up on he was on his soapbox, and I was like, I gotta get up on my soapbox and jump right up there. I got things to say about this.
I have to go find your comment. That's funny.
It just, I don't know. It was just, he's like the unbiased media. It's like, come on, dude. Like, what world are you living in? Who's drinking that Kool-Aid? You gotta be crazy. All right, so let's get back on track. So I'm really glad that we went there, though, because that was it needed to be talked about. So I want to talk about, so you have this book, Spin Sucks, which I love the fact that you branded it off your blog, because I actually did the same thing. And there are some things that I want to kind of dive into a little bit here while for the remainder of the show, because I think they're interesting. Okay. There's a link to Ginny's book in the details. There'll be a link in the show notes for people listening. This is going to be ryanhanley.com/show95 if you're listening and want to come to the page later, or just go to Amazon and type in Spin Sucks, and the book will come up either way. But you say, like, right in the blurb of the book on Amazon, so kind of the very first bullet point, you say sharing a story more powerfully without sex extortion or truth stretching. And I want to know what the heck is wrong with sex in selling things. Like, no, I'm just playing. But what I'm really interested in is, like, so, like, what do you mean by that? Like, is people using these kind of off-the-wall headlines and stuff to get attention? Is that what you're going for, and being a little more down to earth?
So if you've never seen me speak, you'll be surprised by this, but one of the very first things I talk about in the Spin Sex speech is using sex to sell. And I show some examples of where companies have used it and it's bombed. For instance, Jack in the Box has an ad that talks about massages and happy endings, and they don't do that. Everything you see is on the menu. Burger King had a 7-inch sub that will blow your mind with a girl's mouth open sub. So there's lots of GoDaddy's another great example. Yeah, true stuff. I have images to prove it. GoDaddy's another great example where they've used Danica Patrick and sex to sell. And the problem is that sex sells if you're selling sex. But for organizations that aren't selling sex, it's a complete and utter bomb. And what happens is, I think today especially, where we are in this sort of instant gratification, social media was supposed to be the silver bullet that cured all of our issues and was going to help us grow and sell and all this stuff. That hasn't happened because that's not how you grow an organization, and there really is no such thing as overnight success. But everybody says, okay, well, I'm going to try this, and what they've discovered is it just doesn't work. Now they've seen, like Kenneth Cole's a great example, when the riots were erupting in Cairo, he used the Cairo hashtag to promote his his spring collection, which is horrible. And he came out immediately after and said, well, traffic to my website is up and sales are up and our stock's up and blah, blah, blah. Well, the next quarter, his stock decreased, he was delisted, his CEO quit. Like, there was all of this stuff, you know, that trailing 3 months later happened because he did this. And so organizations say, okay, well, let's try it because we can get this really big increase in sales and it's going to help us. Well, it's short term, and longer term it doesn't work. So that's why.
How do you beat the instant the need for instant gratification?
So
right?
hard.
Like, so many
So
problems in this space are
so
caused by instant gratification. Like, how do you beat that?
I saw the Chief Corporate Communications Officer from NASCAR speak. It'd be interesting to see him speak now after the Tony Stewart thing, but I saw him speak in March, I think. And he talked about how when he started, they created a 3-year plan. So I think it was 2012 to 2015. And he said his biggest challenge right now is, at least daily, he has to say to the executives, we're working the plan. We're working the plan. Because we are constantly wanting that, well, what do we get now? Well, what now? What now? And he said that's the hardest part of his job, is to keep them on track and help them understand that there's a plan, it's working, and they're executing it, and they're not going to go off strategy just because they want to have some Twitter success or a Facebook chat or whatever.
Yeah. That, you know, it's such an interesting thing because no matter what level you're at, it's like something about, you know, the boss always wants, like, what is the next thing? I was listening to Mitch Joel, who on the 6 Pixels of Separation podcast, which if you're not listening to when you listen to this show, you should stop listening to Content Warfare and start listening to that because he's way smarter than me. But
he's so smart. He's intimidating.
Yeah, he's so smart.
Yeah.
So he's talking to a guy, and what he said was, oh geez, now I lost what he said. He was talking about instant gratification, and holy crap, now that we're talking about how smart he is, I completely forgot where I was going with that. It doesn't matter. So I think that, you know, this whole he was talking about how we're all based in quarterly stuff, right? Like, everything is,
Yes.
What have you done the last quarter? He called it the Wall Street mentality.
Yep.
And like, that is a huge detriment to businesses.
Yep.
especially when you're a marketer and you often aren't actually making the decisions or don't have the final say
Right.
in where the budget is going,
Right.
and nothing that you do that can have longevity can be done in 3 months, right? Like you can't do anything in 3 months that ultimately will have
Or
a
6
long-term
months.
advantage. Yeah. Every strategy, it has to be 3 years because you know, in the talk that he was talking about was all about psychology. Like all this stuff is based on psychology, and we just don't change our minds that quickly. Consumers don't change their minds that quickly. Like you said with what's his face, Kenneth Cole. Like it took time for that snowball to gain traction. Yeah. Even though what he did was horrid.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the wrong way you want to do things, but yeah, it took 3 months for them to see.
Yeah. So, you know, the next bullet point down on your thing, and I'm not just going off this because they're bullet points or whatever, but the first 3 were just really intriguing to me, and I put them in the details. And that is the idea of humanizing your business. And we're probably going to run up right against the hour mark here because I got a lot. Gini's giving me a lot of value today, so I'm taking as much as I can get. You know? So the second one was humanizing your business. And I firmly believe in this. I think it's incredibly tough to do. Right, especially for larger organizations or quote-unquote traditional organizations, you know, it's hard for them to get their personality out. Mm-hmm. How do you help draw out the personality from a business? Like that to me, I have struggled with that, and not personally, but convincing other people to draw their personality out. How do you do it? How do you make that happen inside an organization?
I'm going to tell you my very favorite story. I was in Omaha 3 years ago, probably. And it was probably September, October. And we're having this conversation about how to tell your story and how to humanize the company. And it was during a 3-hour workshop that I do for business owners. And one of the attendees says, all right, up to this point, I've been on your site, totally get that I'm behind the times, I need to do all this stuff, but I can't tell my story. I'm a commodity business, nobody cares, they just want the lowest price. And I said, okay, you know, it's fair that there may be some organizations that telling your story and humanizing the company doesn't work. Let's have a conversation about this. What do you do? He says, we make pens. So they make pens for the military. Don't fully understand why the military can't use a Sharpie or a big pen. But they make, I'm being sarcastic, but they make pens for the military. And apparently the way the pens are made is very intricate. And, you know, the military will come and say, I have a budget of X and I need 3,000 pens and you got to go do it. So it's very, very intricate. Part of putting these pens together is manual. And because of that, they have to have people actually manually doing it. It can't be done by a machine. And he says, as he's describing this to me, he says, so we only hire people without sight. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? He only hires blind people. And so he's talking about this, and I said, do your competitors hire people with sight? And he goes, yeah. And I said, so your point of differentiation is that your employees, all of them, cannot see. And he's like, yes. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about your employees. And so we start talking about their employees, and you know, he's like, yeah, we have one employee who climbed Mount Hood unassisted. We have another employee who's the #3 gospel singer in the world. And I'm like, dude!
Yeah. You just struck gold.
Right? It's like the best thing ever from a guy who's telling me that he can't tell his stories because he's a commodity business. So I made him promise me that he would get some of these employee stories on video and embed them on the website and do this by Christmas time. And so Christmas time comes and goes, and you know, he hadn't had it up. So I called him and I said, hi, I've been checking. You promised me you'd do this. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. So he did it, and at the end of 2013, he called me and he said, I'm so glad you made me do this. Not only has it humanized the company like you said it would, we are no longer a commodity business. We can tell the military how much it costs for pens. And I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that where I think we get so close to our businesses and we think that what we're doing is not interesting at all, and it takes somebody from the outside to say, okay, well, you know, just to ask the right questions. talk to me about who your customers are. Talk to me about your employees. What do they do outside of work, and how can we tell those stories? And that's how you humanize the brand.
That is an amazing, like, drop the mic moment right there. Like,
I know. I was like, that's the pinnacle of my career. I'm out.
That is fantastic. I love that. You know, and it's I think that a lot of times we forget that the people who buy our stuff are actually people, right? Like, even if they're behind a big company corporate brand, like, there are human beings in there who actually have to hit, like, the PayPal button,
right.
like, send money now thing. Like, there are humans there, and this stuff connects. And you know, that I've always found, you know, I cut my teeth in a 15-person independent insurance agency in Albany, New York, right? The most liked and shared Facebook page, and I've said that, or Facebook post we ever published, and this is back in the day when brand pages actually, like, people can see them and stuff, was a picture of, so we're a family agency. So the office becomes a clubhouse after the place closes, right? Because everyone goes home, they eat dinner, and then we all just came back, and we're all here doing work, and people would bring their dogs and stuff, right? And it was like a clubhouse. I mean, it was what it was. We were doing work, but I mean, you're playing, you're talking, you're having fun.
Yeah.
So it is a picture of my sister-in-law's Wheaton Terrier on top of one of the filing cabinets, and the three kids, the three Murray kids, who all work there, like, pretending like the dog was gonna jump, like a jumper, right? Like, it was gonna jump, and they're all standing like, don't jump, don't jump. And I snap a picture of this, and I share it on Facebook, and I said, this is what happens after we turn the lights off. And or the light, the sign goes off out front, and that thing just went bonkers. Like, people just comment, comment. People were going nuts, and and people would come in and reference that post as they were buying insurance from us. So it's just, I'm 100.
It's a great example.
It's 100% with you. So this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you.
I have to say that when you said these have to last at least 12 minutes, and if we're not having any interaction, then we can just end it. I was like, oh, please let it last a little more than 12 minutes.
Well, I figure, I'm a big believer in set the bar very low, and then so 12 minutes, awesome, that's the mark that I go for. Let people know, I know we've mentioned a couple times, let people know where they can find you. Specifically, I want to know where are you speaking in the future? Where can people find you? Because I've had the joy of getting the in-person Gini presentation. I want to know where anyone who hasn't seen you yet or wants to see you again can find you this fall.
Content Marketing World, HubSpot's Inbound, Marketing Profs. I think that's it. I'm doing some association stuff too, but those are the big ones. Content Jam here in Chicago.
Oh, very cool. I may be an attendee at Inbound. I don't know. I'm gonna try at HubSpot's thing. I would like to be. It's only 2.5 hour drive. We'll see. I would like to be there, but
if you do, you should think about it because they have a 50% off registration today only.
Damn. Now you're gonna make me make a decision.
I know. You're gonna have to make a decision.
All right, Gini. This has been a fantastic conversation. I encourage everybody, go to Amazon, type in Spin Sucks, search for it, buy the book. You don't want to miss this. This is very good stuff. And for someone like me who just doesn't get, I just have never dipped my toes in to PR. I love how you connect kind of the things that make sense, like the idea of humanizing a business and that kind of stuff with an industry that I don't necessarily have a lot of experience in, and I find it very, very valuable, and I know everybody listening / watching this will as well. Gini, any last words before we get out of here?
This was fun. I'm glad we kind of veered off and had some debates and brainstorms. That was fun.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you for everyone for watching. We're out.